The days following Maria's breathtaking performance at the talent show were a whirlwind of attention and emotions. Word of her incredible violin solo spread like wildfire through the school, and suddenly, everyone wanted to talk about it. Students who had barely acknowledged her before now greeted her with wide smiles and compliments. Teachers who once dismissed her potential began approaching her in the hallways, offering praise and even invitations to join advanced music programs. But what struck Maria most was how quickly people seemed to change their tune. The same teacher who had handed her the violin as a joke. The announcement about the school talent show came unexpectedly during homeroom. Posters with bold letters reading, "Showcase your talent," were plastered on bulletin boards, and teachers encouraged students to sign up. For most kids, it was just another event, a chance to goof off or impress their friends. But for Maria, it felt like a door opening before her, one she hadn't dared to walk through until now. At first, she hesitated. Performing in front of an audience seemed terrifying, especially when many of those watching had laughed at her expense before. But then she remembered her father's words. Music is meant to be shared. Carlos had always emphasized that art wasn't truly alive unless it connected with others. With his encouragement, Maria decided to take the leap. She signed up anonymously, listing only her name and the word violin next to it. No one paid much attention. After all, who expected anything remarkable from her? In the weeks leading up to the talent show, Maria practiced harder than ever. Her fingers moved across the strings with newfound precision, and her bow strokes grew smoother, more confident. She chose Vivaldi's Spring from the Four Seasons, a piece she loved for its vibrant energy and graceful melody. It was challenging, but Maria thrived on challenges. Each note became a step closer to proving not just to others, but to herself that she could rise above doubt and ridicule. On the day of the performance, nerves gnawed at Maria's stomach. Backstage, surrounded by classmates dressed in flashy costumes or tuning guitars, she clutched her violin tightly, trying to steady her breathing. Some students glanced at her curiously, whispering among themselves, "Isn't that the janitor's daughter?" One muttered loud enough for her to hear. Maria ignored them, focusing instead on the weight of the violin in her hands and the memory of countless nights spent perfecting this moment. When the MC called her name, Maria took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The spotlight blinded her momentarily, and the murmurs of the crowd washed over her like a wave. She adjusted the microphone stand, placed the violin under her chin, and closed her eyes. For a brief second, everything else faded away. The laughter, the whispers, the judgment. All that remained was the music. Then she began to play. The opening notes rang out clear and pure, silencing the auditorium instantly. Heads turned, jaws dropped, and even the teachers seated in the front row exchanged astonished glances. What started as skepticism quickly transformed into awe, as Maria poured her heart into every note. Her bow danced across the strings with effortless grace, weaving a tapestry of sound that painted pictures of blooming flowers, chirping birds, and sunlit meadows. The audience was spellbound. In a quiet little town nestled between rolling hills and endless fields, life moved at a steady pace. The mornings began with the chirping of birds and the faint hum of activity from the local school, where Maria Rodriguez spent most of her days. Her father, Carlos, worked there as the janitor, a job he had held for over a decade. Every morning, Carlos would rise before sunrise to clean classrooms, mop hallways, and ensure everything was ready for students and teachers alike. Despite his hard work, some people barely noticed him, treating him more like part of the furniture than a person. Maria, on the other hand, stood out in her own way. She wasn't the loudest or the most popular kid in class, but she had a spark that couldn't be ignored. Her big brown eyes always seemed to take in every detail, and her smile could light up even the dullest room. Still, not everyone saw her potential. To many of her teachers, Maria was just the janitor's daughter. They assumed she wouldn't excel academically or shine creatively because of her humble background. It didn't help that Carlos often patched together old desks or fixed broken chairs during breaks, further cementing their perception of the family as simple laborers. One crisp autumn afternoon, the school hosted a special music lesson. Students were encouraged to explore different instruments. Guitars, pianos, flutes, and violins lined up neatly on tables. Most kids flocked toward flashy options like electric keyboards or shiny trumpets. Maria lingered near the back, unsure which instrument to choose. That's when one of the teachers approached her, holding a dusty violin case. With a smirk, the teacher said, "Here, Maria, why don't you give this a try? Maybe it'll sweep you off your feet, just like your dad does with his broom." The comment might have been meant as a lighthearted joke, but the laughter that followed stung deeply. Maria felt her cheeks flush red as her classmates giggled around her. For a moment, she wanted to shrink away, to disappear into the floorboards beneath her feet. But instead, she straightened her shoulders, took the violin, and forced a small smile. "Thank you," she said softly, surprising even herself with how steady her voice sounded. Walking back to her seat, Maria clutched the violin tightly. She knew the teacher hadn't meant anything cruel. It wasn't uncommon for adults to tease lightly. But the words still echoed in her mind. Was she really destined to blend into the background forever, defined only by what others thought of her family? Or could she prove them wrong? As the lesson continued, Maria watched the other students struggle to produce even a single note. Some gave up quickly, others grew frustrated. But Maria sat quietly, running her fingers over the smooth wood of the violin, wondering if maybe, just maybe, she could make something beautiful come out of it. That evening, as she lay in bed replaying the day's events in her head, an idea began to form. What if she used this moment of embarrassment as fuel? What if she turned the joke into something extraordinary? After all, no one expected anything from her now. If she succeeded, it would be entirely on her terms. And so, without telling anyone, not even her father, Maria decided to learn how to play the violin. Little did the world know, this quiet girl with a kind heart and fierce determination was about to rewrite her story in ways no one could have imagined. That evening, Maria sat at the small kitchen table in their modest apartment, the violin resting in front of her like a puzzle waiting to be solved. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards as Carlos moved around, tidying up after a long day's work. He noticed his daughter staring intently at the instrument, her brows furrowed in deep thought. "What's on your mind, Maija?" Carlos asked gently, pulling up a chair beside her. His hands were still calloused from years of gripping brooms and scrubbing floors, but there was a softness in his voice that always made Maria feel safe. "I want to learn how to play this," she said, her tone firm despite the uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "I don't care what anyone thinks. I'm going to make it sound beautiful." Carlos smiled warmly, though he couldn't hide the concern in his expression. Music lessons cost money they didn't have, and finding time for practice wouldn't be easy with Maria's schoolwork and his demanding job. But then something unexpected happened. He leaned back in his chair and chuckled softly. "You know, when I was younger, back in Mexico, I used to play music too," he confessed, his voice tinged with nostalgia. Maria's eyes widened in surprise. She had never heard this story before. "Really? What did you play?" she asked eagerly. "Not much, just an old guitar my brother put together using tin cans and some fishing line," he replied with a laugh. "But we'd sit under the stars at night, strumming away and singing songs about love, loss, and everything in between. It wasn't perfect, but it brought joy to our hearts." Maria listened intently, captivated by the image of her father as a young man, laughing and playing music under the vast sky. For the first time, she realized that music wasn't just something other people did. It ran through her family's veins, even if no one had ever told her. Determined to honor both her own dreams and her father's forgotten passion, Maria decided to teach herself. That night, after finishing her homework, she opened her laptop and searched for free tutorials online. At first, The videos seemed overwhelming. Terms like bowing technique and finger placement sounded foreign and complicated. But Maria refused to give up. She scribbled notes in a notebook, jotting down tips and reminders, determined to master each step. The next day, she visited the school library during lunch break, scanning the shelves for books on violin basics. One librarian, Mrs. Patel, noticed Maria's interest and quietly slipped her a worn-out book titled Beginner's Guide to Violin. "Take good care of it," the librarian whispered with a knowing smile. Maria nodded gratefully, clutching the book tightly as she returned to class. Back home, Maria practiced every evening in the narrow hallway, where the acoustics were better than in her tiny bedroom. At first, the sounds she produced were far from beautiful. Screeches and awkward squeaks filled the air, making her wince. But she persisted, replaying the same notes over and over until they began to flow more smoothly. Sometimes, Carlos would pause his chores to listen, offering words of encouragement. "You're getting better, Mija," he'd say proudly. "Keep going." One chilly night, as Maria struggled with a particularly tricky melody, frustration bubbled inside her. Her fingers cramped, and the bow felt clumsy in her hand. Just as she was about to set the violin aside, a memory surfaced: her father's laughter under the stars, the makeshift guitar, the songs that brought people together. In that moment, she understood that music wasn't about perfection, it was about connection. With renewed determination, she picked up the bow again and started fresh. Weeks turned into months, and slowly but surely, Maria's hard work began to pay off. Notes that once sounded shrill and disjointed now blended into simple melodies. Though she still had a long way to go, Maria felt a sense of accomplishment growing within her. Each note she played became a reminder of her strength, her resilience, and the hidden talents passed down through her family. Little did she know, these late-night practices were laying the foundation for something extraordinary. A journey that would change not only her life, but also the lives of those who doubted her. Maria's late-night practice sessions became a ritual, a sacred part of her day that no one could take away from her. Every evening after dinner and homework, she would retreat to the hallway, violin in hand, ready to face the challenges ahead. The space was cramped, with just enough room for her to stand comfortably without bumping into walls or furniture. A single overhead bowl cast a warm glow, illuminating the sheet music propped up on an old shoebox turnstand. It wasn't ideal, but Maria didn't need perfection. She needed purpose. At first, the sounds coming from her violin were far from pleasant. Each note wobbled unevenly, like a bird trying to find its wings. Her bow often slipped, producing harsh screeches that made her cringe. Neighbors sometimes knocked on the wall to signal their annoyance, but Maria learned to adjust. She practiced softer, slower, and later at night when the building grew quieter. Her father, Carlos, would occasionally peek out of his bedroom, listening silently before giving her a thumbs up. "You're doing great, Mija," he'd whisper, though he probably couldn't recognize the melody himself. Still, his support meant everything to her. To improve, Maria relied heavily on free online tutorials and borrowed books. One video instructor explained how to hold the bow properly, loose but controlled, like holding a delicate flower. Another taught her the importance of posture: shoulders relaxed, back straight, chin resting lightly on the chin wrist. Maria scribbled these tips into her notebook, creating a patchwork of advice that guided her progress. She spent hours practicing scales, repeating them until her fingers ached and her arms felt like jelly. Some nights, exhaustion threatened to pull her down, but she pushed through, reminding herself why she started. One evening, as Maria struggled with a particularly tricky piece, Carlos surprised her by bringing home an old violin he had found discarded in the school storage closet. Its strings were frayed, and the wood was scratched, but it played better than the battered instrument she had been using. "I fixed it up for you," he said shyly, handing it over with pride. Maria's eyes filled with tears as she hugged him tightly. This wasn't just any violin. It was proof of her father's love and belief in her dream. With her new violin, Maria's confidence began to grow. Slowly, painfully, the screeches transformed into notes, and the notes turned into melodies. She started recording herself on her phone, playing back the recordings to hear where she went wrong. It was humbling to listen to her own mistakes, but it also helped her identify areas for improvement. Over time, she noticed subtle changes, not just in her playing, but in herself. She walked taller, spoke more confidently, and carried a quiet determination that people around her couldn't ignore. Her classmates, however, remained oblivious to her transformation. During school days, Maria kept her violin hidden in its case, tucked away under her desk like a secret weapon. Only Mrs. Patel, the kind librarian, knew about Maria's passion. One afternoon, while returning a book, Maria shyly asked if she could borrow another. Of course, Mrs. Patel replied with a knowing smile. And remember, talent doesn't announce itself, it reveals itself. As weeks turned into months, Maria reached a milestone she never thought possible. She played her first complete song. It wasn't anything fancy, a simple folk tune she had learned from one of her tutorial videos, but it was hers. Standing in the hallway, surrounded by the familiar creaks and groans of their aging apartment, Maria closed her eyes and let the music flow. For the first time, she didn't think about technique or mistakes. She simply played. When the final note faded into silence, she opened her eyes to find Carlos standing there, tears streaming down his face. "You did it, Mlija," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. That was beautiful. Maria smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She knew she still had a long way to go, but this moment, this tiny victory, was proof that she was capable of so much more than anyone, including herself, had ever imagined. And deep down, she sensed that her journey was only beginning. Someday, somehow, she would share her music with the world. But for now, this hallway, this violin, and this bond with her father were all she needed to keep moving forward. Maria's journey didn't stop at the school talent show. It was only the beginning of a ripple effect that would touch countless lives. As word of her performance spread beyond the classroom walls, local newspapers caught wind of her story. A reporter named Ms. Harper visited the school one afternoon, asking to interview Maria for an article about young talents in the community. At first, Maria hesitated, unsure if she wanted the extra attention. But Carlos encouraged her, saying, "This is your chance to show people what you're made of, Mlija. Don't shy away from it." The interview took place in the school auditorium, where Maria sat nervously on stage with her violin resting beside her. Ms. Harper asked thoughtful questions about her background, her struggles, and how she overcame them. When Maria spoke about her father's sacrifices and her late-night practice sessions, her voice carried both pride and gratitude. By the end of the conversation, even Ms. Harper seemed moved, promising to write a piece that truly captured Maria's spirit. The article, titled "From Humble Beginnings to Rising Star: The Story of Maria Rodriguez," appeared in the weekend edition of the paper. It featured a photo of Maria playing her violin under the spotlight, her face glowing with concentration. The story highlighted not just her musical talent, but also her resilience and determination. Within days, the article went viral online, shared by readers who were inspired by her journey. Comments poured in from strangers across the country, praising Maria as a symbol of hope and perseverance. With newfound recognition came invitations to perform at community events. Local churches, charity fundraisers, and cultural festivals reached out, eager to have Maria share her gift with wider audiences. Her first public performance outside of school was at a neighborhood block party. Nervous but excited, Maria stepped onto a small makeshift stage, surrounded by families enjoying food and laughter. As she began to play, the chatter faded into silence, replaced by the haunting beauty of her music. When she finished, the crowd erupted into applause, many rushing up afterward to thank her personally. These performances weren't just milestones for Maria. They became opportunities to break barriers. She often introduced herself by sharing snippets of her story, emphasizing the importance of believing in oneself despite adversity. "I wasn't born with a silver spoon," she'd say with a smile. "But I learned that hard work and passion can take you places no one expects." Her words resonated deeply, especially among children from low-income families who saw themselves reflected in her journey. One particularly memorable event was a benefit concert for a local scholarship fund aimed at helping underprivileged students pursue their dreams. Maria performed alongside other young artists, each sharing their unique talents. Afterward, several parents approached her, thanking her for being a role model for their kids. One mother tearfully told Maria, "My daughter looks up to you so much. Seeing you succeed gives her hope that she can do great things too." As Maria continued performing, she saved every penny she earned, from donations at events or small honorariums, to buy her first professional-grade violin. For months, she scored catalogs and visited music stores, testing instruments until she found the one. It was sleek and polished, with a rich tone that resonated perfectly with her style. On the day she finally purchased it, Carlos stood proudly beside her, his eyes glistening with tears. "This violin represents everything you've worked for," he said, hugging her tightly. "Never forget where you started." Maria knew this new chapter of her life was bittersweet. While she reveled in her success, she remained grounded, aware of how far she had come and how much farther she still wanted to go. Every note she played carried echoes of her past, the laughter that once hurt her, the nights spent practicing alone, and the love of a father who believed in her when few others did. But now, those echoes blended harmoniously with something else, a sense of purpose, a desire to inspire others, and the unshakable belief that music had the power to change lives, including her own. By the time Maria graduated high school, she had earned scholarships to prestigious music conservatories, solidifying her status as a rising star. Yet even as accolades piled up, she stayed true to herself, remembering the girl who once held a dusty old violin and dared to dream. Her journey was proof that greatness wasn't defined by where you came from, but by the courage to rise above limitations and create something extraordinary. Years passed, and Maria's journey came full circle in ways she never could have imagined. Now a celebrated violinist touring internationally, she returned to her hometown for the first time in years to perform at the very school where her story began. The once dusty auditorium had been renovated, with fresh paint on the walls and new lighting installed, but the familiar creak of the wooden stage brought back a flood of memories. The night of the concert, the room buzzed with excitement. Students, teachers, parents, and community members filled every seat, eager to see the girl who had once been underestimated shine on the stage she transformed into her own. Backstage, Maria stood quietly, running her fingers over the polished surface of her professional-grade violin. She thought about all the moments that had led her here, the laughter, the late-night practices, the sacrifices her father had made, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. When the curtains opened and Maria stepped into the spotlight, the audience erupted into applause. For a brief moment, she paused, taking in the faces of those who had shaped her life. There was Carlos, sitting proudly in the front row, his eyes glistening with tears. Mrs. Patel, the kind librarian, waved enthusiastically from a few seats away, and scattered throughout the crowd were former classmates, some of whom had doubted her, others who had cheered her on. All of them were now united by the music she was about to share. Maria began with Vivaldi's Spring, the same piece that had silenced critics during her high school talent show. As the first notes rang out, the room fell silent, captivated once again by the beauty of her playing. But this time, it wasn't just admiration filling the air. It was pride. Pride for how far Maria had come, pride for what she represented, and pride for the community that had witnessed her rise. After the final note faded, Maria lowered her violin and turned to face the audience. Instead of leaving the stage immediately, she took a deep breath and addressed them directly. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "This town, this school, these people, they are part of who I am today. Without my father's hard work, without Mrs. Patel slipping me books when no one was looking, without even the challenges that pushed me to prove myself, I wouldn't be standing here." She went on to thank the teachers who had supported her, acknowledging their role in her growth. Then, glancing toward the teacher who had handed her the violin as a joke, she added gently, "And to those who didn't believe in me, thank you too. You taught me resilience, and for that, I'll always be grateful." Her words drew murmurs of approval from the crowd, and the teacher nodded solemnly, visibly moved. The second half of the concert featured original compositions inspired by Maria's journey. One piece, titled Echoes of Home, wove together melodies reminiscent of Mexican folk songs her father used to hum, layered with vibrant rhythms symbolizing her determination. Another, called Breaking Barriers, captured the tension and triumph of overcoming adversity, its soaring crescendos bringing many in the audience to tears. After the performance, Maria stayed behind to sign autographs and take photos with fans. Children lined up eagerly, clutching violins or sheet music, asking for advice. One little girl shyly handed Maria a drawing of herself playing the violin, saying, "I want to be like you when I grow up." Maria knelt down, hugged her, and whispered, "You already have everything you need inside you. Just keep believing." That evening, as Maria packed up her violin and prepared to leave, she noticed something taped to the backstage door, a handwritten note from a student. It read, "Because of you, I know dreams can come true. Thank you for showing us the way." Holding the note close, Maria felt a lump form in her throat. This was why she played, not for fame or fortune, but to inspire others to dream bigger than anyone thought possible. Today, Maria travels the world, performing in grand concert halls and intimate venues alike. Yet wherever she goes, she carries her hometown in her heart, sharing stories of resilience and hope through her music. Her legacy isn't just in the awards she's won or the records she's sold, it's in the countless lives she's touched along the way. From the janitor's daughter who dared to defy expectations to the international star using her voice to uplift others, Maria Rodriguez reminds us all that greatness often begins in the unlikeliest places. And sometimes, all it takes is one brave step and the courage to let your music be heard. Maria's journey took her far beyond the small town where she grew up, but she never forgot its people or their struggles. As she pursued her studies at a prestigious music conservatory, she became increasingly aware of the privileges she now enjoyed, opportunities that so many others in her hometown could only dream of. This realization ignited a deep desire within her to give back, to use her platform not just for personal success, but to uplift those who felt trapped by circumstance. During breaks from school, Maria returned home to visit her father and reconnect with her roots. On one such trip, she organized a free workshop for local students interested in music. Held in the community center, the event drew dozens of children and teenagers, many of whom came from families struggling to make ends meet. Some had never touched an instrument before, while others played on hand-me-down guitars or cracked keyboards salvaged from garage sales. Maria welcomed them all with open arms. Standing before the group, violin in hand, she began by sharing her story. Not just the highlights, like winning scholarships or performing on big stages, but also the hard parts. She spoke candidly about the teacher's cruel joke, the long nights spent practicing in silence, and the moments when self-doubt threatened to overwhelm her. "I'm telling you this," she said, her voice steady and kind, "because I want you to know that it's okay to feel scared or unsure. What matters is what you do next." She then demonstrated how to hold a violin properly, explaining basic techniques in simple terms anyone could understand. For those without access to instruments, she showed creative alternatives, using rubber bands stretched over cardboard boxes to mimic stringed instruments or tapping rhythms on desks to practice timing. Her message was clear. You didn't need expensive tools to start making music. You needed passion and perseverance. The workshops quickly became a regular occurrence, drawing more participants each time. Parents thanked Maria profusely, saying they'd never seen their kids so excited about anything before. One mother tearfully recounted how her son, who struggled in school, found confidence through playing a makeshift drum set made from pots and pans after attending Maria's session. These stories fueled Maria's determination to keep going, even as her own schedule grew busier with performances and classes. Word of Maria's advocacy work spread beyond her hometown. Invitations poured in from schools, youth organizations, and even national conferences, asking her to speak about overcoming adversity and pursuing dreams against all odds. At these events, Maria emphasized the importance of representation. When I was growing up, she told audiences, I rarely saw someone like me, a Latina girl from a working-class family, on stage or celebrated for their talents. That's why I stand here today, to show you that your background doesn't define your future. Your dreams are valid, no matter where you come from. Her speeches resonated deeply, particularly with young people from marginalized communities. After one conference, a shy teenage boy approached her, clutching a battered flute. I've always wanted to play, he admitted, but everyone says it's impossible because we're poor. Maria knelt down to meet his gaze, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. Impossible is just a word, she replied with a warm smile. You decide what happens next. Back at the conservatory, Maria balanced her rigorous training with her advocacy efforts, often juggling late-night rehearsals with early morning calls to arrange logistics for upcoming workshops. Though exhausting, she found immense fulfillment in knowing that her influence extended beyond concert halls. Music, she realized, wasn't just about technical skill or applause. It was about connection, healing, and empowerment. By the time Maria graduated, she had built a reputation not only as a gifted musician, but also as a beacon of hope for underprivileged youth. Scholarships established in her name helped fund music education programs in underserved areas, ensuring that other children wouldn't have to fight as hard as she did to pursue their passions. Yet Maria knew her work was far from over. With every note she played, she carried the voices of those still waiting for their chance to shine, and vowed to keep fighting until everyone had the opportunity to discover their own melody. Through tireless dedication and unwavering compassion, Maria proved that true greatness isn't measured by individual achievements alone, but by the lives you touch along the way. And for countless young dreamers, she became living proof that no obstacle was too great to overcome, not when you had the courage to believe in yourself and the power of music to light the way.